Ahoy everyone, Tightrope here, and today we're taking a look at the 2.1.2 hotfix for Company of Heroes 3. The first thing I want to say is that I'm really happy we're getting a hotfix, because I feel like with a lot of the patches recently, it's been give us a big patch, 3 months of Operation Silence, and that's far from ideal. But if they want to commit to this kind of format where it's a big patch every 3 months, and then a follow-up smaller hotfix 3 weeks after that, I think that's a much better format for improving the balance of the game. We're starting out with Mortars. In the previous patch, Relic made a change where the shell travel time of Mortars from launch to land would be the same whether you were shooting near or at max range with the mortar. That made the block stronger, and they haven't reverted that change. Instead, they've increased the travel time from 2.5 up to 3 seconds for lethal damage. So, auto fire, HE barrages, stuff like that, they can do damage. They've been nerfed, but utility options like smoke and flares, they'll still be on the same old 2.5 seconds travel time. I have mixed feelings about this change. You may remember a while back I went on a bit of a rant about how I felt mortars were too weak in this game, so it was nice to see mortars being strong and being relevant once more. But this particular implementation, I'm not a huge fan of. In my play experience, being on the receiving end of the new shell travel time mortars, the problem I thought was you could be getting absolutely clobbered by the enemy's mortar at max range. And then if you wanted to force that mortar away, you want to run over there, chase it off. I mean, this is such a long way to run. You only see 35-ish range. There could be a whole bunch of units between you and the mortar. You've got no idea. It takes you ages to run there, and you're in the dark. There could be a lot of defenses guarding it as well. So it's really hard to counter mortars by running over there and forcing them away. So their mortars were super effective at long range, and you were super ineffective at being able to counter them from the same range. Whereas previously, if they were clobbering you, you were probably in sight range of them, and you could run over there, force them away quite easily. That risk reward for the mortar user no longer there. I mean, it's not like players were purposefully setting their mortars up in close range to try and get those fast shell travel time shots. But yeah, as the person trying to counter the mortars, felt quite bad. And I think, maybe that's exacerbated by the scatter of mortars in this game. They've got a very tight scatter. There's a barrage I did with the mortar earlier at pretty much max range. You can see the scatter pattern is pretty much the same as the formation of a squad out in the open. So basically all your shells are going to land all the time, even at max range. So a combination of fast shell travel time along with really tight scatter just, didn't really make a lot of sense. Mortars also got a target table penalty against vehicles. Now they will only do 50% damage when they land on vehicles. So you may be unaware, but mortars actually do 100 damage per shell. But when they're landing on infantry that are out in the open, they can only do 30 damage per hit. So there's quite a big disconnect between that, right? But what that meant was, with the fast travel time, 100 damage per shell, they could absolutely clobber even like pretty fast vehicles like the Humber. And because it has such a low amount of health, you could land one mortar shell on it, one AT gun shot, and the Humber was dead. And if they happened at the same time, there's basically nothing you could do about that. And maybe a similar story for the Stummel, which has to be still to shoot. Mortars could counter them very effectively. So now they'll only take, they'll still be decent. 50 damage per shot's nothing to sneeze at, but it's not going to be like game ending. You're not going to get hit by one mortar shell and then like one AT gun shot or something like that, and then it's just game over for your light vehicle. Now, it's more similar to what like infantry are taking from mortars, which I think is sensible. So we're going to try the delayed fuse, though. Apparently there's no penalty, target tail penalty against vehicles. See how it goes. This number here. That looks like a direct hit. Yeah, that was a big one. Relic also gave mortars a target table bonus when shooting at wire, so we'll see how that goes here. Should be able to clear off this field of wire more effectively. One thing I will say as well, with the new half a second extra delay added, the travel time of the shells doesn't look as stupid as it did before. So that's also a benefit of the changes that are made in this hotfix. Mortars look a little bit more realistic with how fast they're moving. So there we go, clearing off a patch of barbed wire pretty effectively. Now, if you look in the stats, I think mortars have a penetration of 20 and barbed wire has an armor value of 20. So you may think that a 2.5 penetration bonus against wire might not be necessary, but mortars have an AoE penetration value of 10. So I guess on the AoE hits further away from the mortar, they will still do guaranteed to do damage instead of having a chance to bounce. A similar change to that I'm wondering if we're going to see happen in COH3 is grenades against mines. Grenades have 25 penetration and mines have 35 armor. So if you throw a grenade on top of a mine to try and blow it up, you're only about 70% chance of that actually happening. And this happened in COH2. There was a specific change so that grenades, keeping their current penetration values, could blow up mines. Is that going to happen in COH3 as well? We'll have to wait and find out. Since the patch notes mention flares, I did want to bring them up separately. First off, I'm going to target this area with a flare. You can see there's no cover anywhere nearby. I'm going to pop a flare on that area. And now there's light cover there for some reason. So I'm guessing that's a bug. A little bit strange. You can't see any indication like visually on the ground that there should be light cover there. So I'm guessing that's a bug. Maybe Relic can address that, but that's separate to the point. You can see that the flare is up in the air providing vision, but then the vision goes away, but the flare's still flying around in the air. And when you're on the receiving end of this, it's very hard for you to tell when your opponent's vision has run out, right? Because the flare's still flying around. And do you know, like, oh, it's up high, so it's still giving vision versus when it's down lower, is not giving vision? That's quite hard to tell, with like the changing zoom angles, with elevations, and it's just, not very intuitive to know when flare is giving your opponent vision where it has expired but still flying around. So I'd kind of like to see something about that addressed, such that once the flare stops giving vision, it disappears more quickly, so that when you, as the opponent, knows, okay, their vision is gone. Because, for like example, recon planes, once the plane's flown away, it's not giving them vision anymore. So you know that, and it should be the same for flares. The paradrops that you can get right at the start of the game, such as Falchion Pioneers or MGs for US Forces, now start on a 30-second cooldown at the beginning of the game. So you can't immediately lock into this, drop them in the middle of the map, maybe on like an important building, and make your opponent's life hell. It's going to slow down these paradrops, which I think is a good change, and I think most people have been asking for this change since like the first month the game has been out, so better late than never. Now, if you field one of these, the cooldown after using it has been changed from 75 seconds to 60 seconds. So, if you're looking to field multiple of these units, eventually you'll catch up, offsetting the 30-second penalty at the start of the game. And on top of that, Falchion Pioneers have had a manpower cost reduction by 20 from 280 to 260. So they're getting a slight buff there to offset this start of the game nerf. I have seen some players maybe worried about that. Falchion Pyro blobs with grenade launchers are a bit of a problem in team games, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. So I've created a mod here where I've made it so that Falchion Pioneers can get suppressed, but they'll never get pinned. And I want to compare the performance of a suppressed Falchion Pioneer versus one that's just natty. So we'll see how it goes here. So both got to fire one before getting suppressed, and they're both invulnerable as well. So you can see the suppressed penalties here, 300% increased weapon cooldown. But no change to reload. So, you can see that the suppressed one is firing slower, but not by like a huge amount. Whereas in COH2, when you were suppressed, your reload penalty was 4 times. 4 times multiplier of the time. So that would cause like Panzerstrix to take like 30 seconds to reload. So as you can see, suppression just isn't really very effective against grenade launchers, and I think that's a bit of a problem. One thing I didn't articulate in the previous demonstration is that grenade launchers largely work off scatter, not off accuracy. So the 75% accuracy penalty by being suppressed didn't really matter to them too much, because still going to be hitting their targets based on scatter. And as far as I'm aware, there's no scatter penalty from being suppressed. So that's why the suppressed unit worked so well in that previous test. And a similar thing kind of applies, but to a lesser extent, to handheld anti-tank. And anti-tank does rely a lot more on accuracy, but the scatter values on them are actually very, very good as well. So that, as we're about to see, even while suppressed, a bazooka team, for instance, still lands on the enemy's tank quite a lot. And, you know, I don't think that suppression is effective enough. So here we go. So these guys have missed one so far. This is at 35 range, so pretty common range to be engaging infantry with tanks. But they're landing basically every shot. So, yeah, in my opinion, probably needs to be like either a reload penalty added to suppression or a scatter penalty added, because at the moment I think suppression is maybe not effective enough against weapons that have good scatter profiles and are AoE based. The vehicle production time buffs that you find in the US Forces Armored Battle Group and Wehrmacht Breakthrough have been nerfed from a 75% time reduction to a 50% time reduction. So personally, I didn't really use fast deploy in armored too often. I like strength and steel more. So maybe it's not like that important for US Forces Armored. But for Wehrmacht Breakthrough, it was certainly the much more popular option because not many players like use the 2.5 ton utility truck. Seen as a bit of a dead fish of a option. So it's definitely hurting them more. And it's going to take some sting out of those like verbal rush to target stall type strategies that were pretty popular in 1v1. These days, now you are able to construct these defensive options more quickly. RAK have decided you need to be able to remove them more quickly as well. So starting out with wire cutters, after giving the option, this should take 1.25 seconds to snip. So we're going to have a race here. How fast to construct a 5 stack of wire compared to how fast to snip a 5 stack. Who will win?
Deny that area, pioneers. Task complete.
Oh, it looks like construction's in the lead. Squad seems to follow along a bit better. Maybe if like the next guy ready to snip would like run to the next piece of wire if you queued it up, it would work a bit better, but faster to plant wire than to snip it still after this change. Sticking with removing wire, now grenades have a damage bonus against wire. So wire by default has 150 health. Grenades, most of them do about 120 damage. So I'm going to try throw one right in the middle of this. It's 4 stack of wire here. See what the impact is. So just about, you probably could clear 3 pieces of wire with 1 grenade if you got the targeting right. Well, this is with like a basic stick grenade as well. This is one of the weakest grenades there is. Tank traps have had their build time increased from 6 up to 7 seconds, which I think is a good thing. Now, I don't see too much of them on 1s, but in a few of the 4s games that I cast, players were building like 3 rows of them, walling off like a whole third of the map. And yeah, for how easy they were to build compared to how hard they are to kill, the equation wasn't really making sense. So I think that's sensible. On top of that, they're now easy to hit because they've got an increase in target size from 20 up to 25. So previously, like an anti-tank gun shooting at them at max range would have about an 8% chance to miss. Now will hit every time. So yeah, it's going to be easier to clear off, hit every time with more weapons. For the other defenses, sandbags and Sanger walls have had their target size increase from 20 to 25 as well. Similar story with wire, increase in target size from 1 to 25, so way easier to attack to kill wire. It's had an armor reduction from 35 to 20, which means actually you might be able to like kill it by shooting at it with small arms, where previously that wasn't really possible, especially if your small arms got a bit of extra penetration on it like machine guns. And the reinforced barbed wire has had a health reduction from 250 to 240, which doesn't sound like much, but most tanks do 120 damage per shot, so it's a 2-shot kill instead of just surviving after 2 shots. Moving on to the factional balance changes, and we're starting out with US Forces and the M1919 machine gun. The defensive bonus it gets from being set up has been changed. It used to be a flat damage reduction, so it will work against like all forms of incoming damage, reduce it by 20% while it's set up. Now it's 20% harder to hit, so it will still provide a similar amount of defensive bonus against incoming small arms damage, rifle machine gun fire, but against most forms of explosives, which are more based on scatter rather than accuracy. It's going to offer no real measurable bonuses. So yeah, it's going to be taking a lot more damage from things like mortar and grenades now. It'll be way easier to kill the US Forces machine guns. On top of that, its Vet 1 defensive setup also been changed from damage reduction to harder to hit. So that is like really bad now. That is like a dreadful Vet 1. I think they're going to have to change that going forwards because that is truly terrible. I do wonder, this is a pretty big nerf. And like apart from the damage reduction previously, the US Forces machine gun, it didn't have like a lot going from it. Like DPS wise, it's worse than machine gun. Got like a smaller firing arc, less suppression. So there's not a lot going for it. So we'll see how relevant it is after this. It might need another change. The M3 assault carrier you get in the heavy weapons battle group has been nerfed. Its health has been reduced from 400 to 380. So used to get plus 80 health. Now it only gets plus 60, though they haven't updated the description in here yet. At first glance, it's a bit of a confusing change because it doesn't change the number of shots to kill from most regular, like anti-tank sources, things like AT guns and stuff. But the change was so that Fausts or snares can get engine damage on it after 2 hits. So remember, it's got that reckless assault bonus now, that the first dose of damage, or essentially, 50% damage reduction while it's above health. So that first snare only does 60 damage instead of 120. And then the second one will connect, bring it down to exactly half health, which in this particular instance is not quite enough to do engine damage, but if it takes like even one penetrating hit from like a gun, which it's going to, it will be engine damage. So they made that change, so 2 snares are going to give the M3 assault carrier engine damage in basically every scenario, which I think is probably fine. Like, this was a pretty big buff getting this from Vet 0, so I'm on board with that. Also, when it comes to towing, there was a very important bug fix. I had it happen to me in the previous patch. I had a Vet 3 M5 and it got stuck to my tow vehicle, and the only way to detach it was to suicide the towing vehicle. And I've heard that happen to like 17-pounders, stuff like that. I've seen it on Reddit. And I believe they've fixed that now with this bug fix. Also, another very important bug fix for US Forces in the Mechanized Support Center to the Heavy Barrels upgrade. It used to be the case that once you ticked Heavy Barrels, this would only apply to units you made after going for this tick, not to units that were already on the field. So it did kind of limit its effectiveness if you want to use it on the quad. But now we're going to tick it. Quad's already on the field, and I got the bonus range, able to reach the sniper after the range boost. So your heavy barrels is fixed. Moving on to the Wehrmacht balance changes, and we're starting out with Jagers. In the previous patch, they weren't seeing much play, bit of an over nerf there. So we've got a couple of buffs in this patch. First off to the scoped rifle upgrade. It's been increased in damage by 2 per shot again. So in the previous patch, it was 2 per shot more. Now it's 2 per shot more again. So really trying to push those scoped rifles. Here they are compared to a Tommy with a Bren. You can see the Tommy with the Bren is better at all ranges, marginally. But remember, these scope rifles partially ignore cover. So as soon as you take light cover versus light cover into effect, scope rifles are better at all ranges. And then if we compare moving to moving, it's literally like twice as much DPS. So yeah, they will be bullying Tommies with this scope rifle upgrade now. Jaegers also got 2 buffs to their veterancy. At Vet 1, their harder to hit bonus got increased by 5%, and at Vet 2, their accuracy bonus got increased by 5%. And that doesn't sound like much, but it's actually a pretty big deal, especially the Vet 1 bonus, because you can get Vet 1 immediately with Luftwaffe officers' quarters. And 20% is actually huge because, their competition, Allied mainlines, they're getting 10% harder to hit at Vet 1. And even like a lot of other elites are only getting 15% harder to hit a Vet 1. So 20%, like straight away, you can get that with training.
You have
That's
orders?
big. Speaking of the officers' quarters upgrades, in the tier 1 structure, the cost of it has been reduced by 10 fuel. Like say in the past, before the veterancy overhaul, Vet 1 used to give like an extra combat boost. So the Vet 1 power spike was larger, and that's why it needed to cost more. And if you remember, like back in the way back days, the early days of COH3, Vet 1 Grenadiers with the MP40 upgrade was like the dominant strategy. So I do think it made sense. It had to be costed more expensive, and now that's no longer the case. So it'll be interesting to try out some new builds. I think like against Brits, it'll be pretty hard to use this, because if you go for this, then you'll delay your tech up. You won't have a very good answer to the Humber. But I think against US forces, you can still get this tech up, push out an AT gun in time to answer the Greyhound. Don't forget the tier 1 officers quarters upgrade also gives a bonus to coastals and falchion pyres. And, you know, given the changes to falchion pyres, maybe we'll see a few more of those. Especially in team guys, I think it makes a big difference for them, because it gives them that out of combat healing, so you can delay your healing. And, you know, maybe that can save you some early resources. And on coastals, you know, you get access to the AT grenade nowadays with the officers' quarters, so early snare could help deter some light vehicle harass. The 221 has received a huge number of changes in this patch. First off, to its rotation and pivot rate, increased by about 10%, so you know, it's a little bit more maneuverable as it's making its turns. Not a huge deal, but the bulk of the changes are to the Panzerbuchse upgrade. It's had an accuracy increase by about 20% at all ranges. That's a big deal. Like its mid-range is at 20, and now it's a 100% chance to hit a Humber at mid-range, and even at like max range, I think it's like about 85% to hit a Humber. So it's a really big improvement, because it was pretty frustrating when this missed your enemy's light vehicle. It was kind of like a light vehicle hunter, but constantly miss. That's not going to be happening as much anymore. Though do remember, this does have a 50% accuracy penalty when it's moving. So, you know, you need to be stationary to get that bonus, or, you know, to get that 100% chance to hit a mid-range. Otherwise, it's closer to 50%, like 52%. So I think being stationary on the 221 is going to be quite important. And I think that's where like the rotation rate bonus comes in handy, because you'll just be able to sit there and pivot. And because pivot, as I said, as you might have found out in my guide about this, pivot doesn't count as moving. So you'll be able to get that stationary accuracy by just sitting there, pivoting. They're trying to move around you, and you're just blasting them every shot, and they're going to land every shot. So it's going to be maybe a little bit bad at chasing for a kill, but as like a defensive tool, it's going to be extremely strong. Relic have also altered the way the gun itself functions. First off, they've removed its wind-up time. So after it like locks onto a target, it used to have an 1/8 of a second delay before it shoots. That's gone now, so it's going to feel more responsive. And they've also made a change which I think is a little bit confusing to me. I think what they mean is that the gun itself used to articulate a little bit, like the Panzerbuchse used to turn from side to side a bit, and that's gone now. But now just naturally, it will be able to fire. It will look like it can shoot straight ahead only, but it will actually be able to fire in a wider cone than previously. So should, I think, just make it easier when it's turning, and there'll be less of a delay from a turn to a fire. So we'll see how that feels here. To 9 degrees. And that feels pretty snappy, right? Faster rotation. And like almost immediate lock on. So what I wanted to do here was swap these around. And see if I could like pivot around this, stop it from being able to fire with my Humber. See if I could outposition it. Not really, right? Especially because, like, in COH3, it's so annoying. There's still that problem where occasionally your vehicle just hits like a hitch, stutters, and then just slows down. But even besides that, it seems like you can't, even with a vehicle as nimble as the Humber, circle around the 221 without getting blasted by it now. This ability, which is now called Blinding Shot, has also been buffed. Its aim time has been reduced by close to a whole second. So let's see how that feels. That's pretty fast. So yeah, this did, fall out of favor after the slow got removed from it. But, with that kind of responsiveness, disables weapons, blocks vision, and how fast that fires, I imagine people are going to start using it again. And if you can catch some like infantry nearby the unit as well, that's all the better. And on top of this, you may notice that even though I've got the Panzer Buchse upgraded, I can actually upgrade the radio antenna as well. So a new change in this patch as well. You can upgrade the radio and the Panzer Buchse at the same time. So the problem with the Panzer Buchse used to be, you get it, maybe you'll kill your enemy's light vehicle, and then for the next like 8 minutes of the game, it's useless until they got their medium tank out. So that's no longer going to be the case. You'll be able to use this for radio duties as well. So yeah, looks like Luftwaffe Company is back on the menu. Moving on to the Africa Corps changes, and we're starting out in the Panzer Command Battle Group. The anti-tank Overwatch has been changed. Now there's a 1.75 second delay at the start after the circle appears before the shells start to come in. Just gives the enemy a bit more time to react and start to dodge before the shells start clobbering them. I think previously bishops would just like die straight away after they got their health reduction. Didn't give you any time to dodge, and that should no longer be the case. But to compensate for that, the delay between shells has been reduced by 0.1 of a second, so should fire the same amount of shells over the whole course of the ability's duration. So we'll see how that goes. Drop it here. Circles on the ground. Give this a reverse command over to here. Ooh, that was a very close call. You're going to have to be pretty quick to react. Hope that there's nothing like hanging up your bishop's movement. I could easily see that still dying. After this, the Elefant hasn't been seeing much play, so it's been buffed. First off, it's had a command point cost reduction from 6 down to 9. So if you want to rush it out now, it arrives at the exact same time as the Archer, which is interesting. Also, comparing that to other heavy tanks, you could actually unlock all the stuff down here and then unlock all the stuff down here. And that's 13 command points, and that's the exact same amount as if you rush to the Black Prince as Brits. So, you can unlock your whole battle group, and Brits have only just unlocked the Black Prince. So, poor Black Prince. And once you have unlocked it, it is now cheaper to call in. 600 manpower down by 100, and 160 fuel down by 20. And a bug fix to the Vet 3 Krudschützen. Now its binoculars are working correctly. So yeah, you get a crazy amount of vision on this while moving. Really, really good. There was another really nice change found in the bug fix section this time round, and it was related to queuing. Now, after the match has been found, there's a new indicator to that. It says match found down the bottom there. It grays out the cancel button, grays out the leave lobby button, so you won't accidentally leave a game and leave a penalty. So it's a really nice change. Previously, what I used to do is look for the store up the top. Once the store got grayed out, I knew that a match had been found, even though there was no indicator for that on the screen. But yeah, now there's like a proper implementation of that, which I'm really happy to see. Another fix related to queuing that I'd like to see addressed is that when you queue and then you tab out, there's like a green flashing progress meter on the game. And once that stops flashing, that means the queue is finished and your game is ready. That helps you to know you need to tab back in. But after the first game of the day, that doesn't happen anymore. There's no progress meter anymore. So, unless you want to restart your game after every match, you're kind of missing out on that flashing queuing indicator, which I find really helpful. So overall, a pretty nice collection of balance changes in this hotfix, which is great to see, especially the change of the US Forces machine gun from damage reduction to received accuracy. I think combined up with the Paradrop cooldown nerf is really going to shake up the meta quite a lot. And, even if it didn't, even if you didn't like these balance changes, I hope that Relic continues this kind of schedule of releasing a patch like this, focused on balance between the major patches, because it will just keep things fresh, especially for players who play this game quite a lot. Thank you to all of my Patreon backers, and if you appreciate these videos, I hope you consider joining up.